Hi viewers, today is our first lecture on the study of the nervous system, and the study of the nervous system. For this purpose we have to actually divide the nervous system into the two major subdivisions, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. And if you see the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, means the nervous system has two major subdivisions, central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Now, as far the central nervous system is concerned, it consists of two main organs. It consists of two organs only. It is not just two main organs, but it consists of just two organs, the brain and the spinal cord, which are continuous with each other. Reason, because they have actually developed from the same neural tube, from the single neural tube whose upper portion has given rise to brain, and the rest of the portion or the caudal portion has given rise to the spinal cord. So, it is a nervous system, means it will be the central nervous system will have number one organ, that is called the brain, and another the spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord, these two, they comprise of the central nervous system. Central, we call it central because the brain is housed by the bones which are forming the cranial cavity, and the spinal cord is accommodated in the vertebral canal that is lying in the center of the vertebrae, central of the vertebral canal. This is called the center of the vertebral canal. This is lying within the vertebrae, within our vertebrae. Now, brain and spinal cord, because lying centrally here in the cranial cavity and in the vertebral canal, and this in fact is connected to the peripheral organs by means of the nerves, and these nerves will constitute the peripheral nervous system. That means the brain is connected here to the peripheral organs by means of the cranial nerves. So, that means the peripheral nervous system should actually be comprised of 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and spinal cord is connected to the peripheral organs via 31 pairs of spinal nerves. And this brain connected to the 12 pairs of spinal cranial nerves, and spinal cord connected to the 31 pairs of spinal nerves. This together is called the nervous system. And here the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, it is not just the nerves, but we have got a lot of other things also which are lying in the peripheral nervous system. And if, for example, you are watching here the brain, spinal cord, cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Cranial nerves and spinal nerves, they are forming the peripheral nervous system, and spinal cord and brain, they are forming the central nervous system. Both of these systems together are called the nervous system. This is nervous system. But you see that it is not just the nervous system, these structures we have to study. We have to study certain other things also. Like certain other things means what? We have to actually study here the vasculature, we see the vessels. Vessels means the blood supply of the brain and spinal cord. We have to study here the meninges, and we have to study here the cerebrospinal fluid, means the circulation of the cerebrospinal fluid, the meninges and the blood supply also we have to study along with the nervous system. And in nervous system I told you that we have to study the central nervous system, which is nothing but the brain and the spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, which is nothing but the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. And when we will study the nervous system plus blood supply and meninges and the CSF circulation and etc., because there are a lot of diseases related to the circulation or the obstruction to the circulation of the CSF. There are a lot of diseases which are related here not to the nervous system, but they are related to the meninges. Lot of diseases related to the nervous system actually are because of the interruption in the blood supply. And there are obviously a lot of diseases related to the nervous system themselves also. And you see, if for example you see these structures, so that means if the nervous system study, blood supply plus meninges and CSF together, you can call it now the neuroanatomy. This is neuroanatomy. So neuroanatomy is not just the study of brain and the spinal cord. We have to study the cranial nerves and spinal nerves also. And after we have actually finished all these things, you have to come back again and watch the blood supply, the venous drainage, the circulation of the CSF, and obviously before that various coverings are the membranes which are covering the brain and the spinal cord together. Why brain and spinal cord both? Because the brain and spinal cord initially it was a single neural tube. And the single neural tube's upper, or you say its a rostral portion will bulge and will form an expanded thing here. This is called the brain, and the rest of the thing will remain cylindrical. You will call it a spinal cord. So spinal cord and brain, they are actually developing from the same neural tube here. For this purpose, you have to actually see here, this is what we call here the neuroanatomy. But before starting any system, this is my advice to the students, that they should have some idea about the early development of that system, and bit of you see, not too much in detail, but a bit of the histology of that system also. Histological view, I say histological review of that system. Means here the fundamental, I say the basic functional unit of the nervous system, you know, that is the neuron. So you should have some idea about the neuron. Neuron means histological structure of the neuron and what are the types of the neuron which are present in the nervous system, because this will be relevant. At the same time, you have to actually watch, and when repeatedly I am actually talking about the neural tube, that means you should have some idea about from where the neural tube has developed. And in this neural tube, we have to actually see here how the neural tube and from where the neural tube comes here. For this purpose, you have to have a little idea about what is the basic embryologic development of the nervous system from neural tube development here. The brief view about the neural tube development. The system that is called the nervous system, or to better understand the neuroanatomy, this is must that you should have a brief view about the development of the neural tube here. And from the neural tube, you will be able to understand how many parts of the nervous system are there, from where the brain develops, from where the spinal cord, how they are interconnected, related to each other, what are the neurons, where from the neurons come, what are the neuroglial cells, what type of neurons in fact are present within central nervous system, from where the peripheral nervous system develops. All these 3 and 4 things, whatever you have actually seen previously, will develop from this nervous system development here, embryonic development of nervous system. You call it neurulation. That happens, you see, in the 3rd week of the embryonic development here. And for this purpose, you have to actually watch this. See, this is here, this black color, this is ectoderm. In between we have got the mesoderm, and here this blue color is the endoderm. And you are actually watching this central cord-like structure which is in fact present here, that is called the notochord. You have to remember these few things here in embryology. You don't go into the embryology in details of the embryology, you have to actually watch these things here. Now with this, with the induction of the neural tube, you will see this with the induction of this structure whose name is the notochord. This notochord will induce the central portion of the ectoderm. This is ectoderm, because this is here ventral to the ectoderm. So it will now undergo here, this will actually carry out the induction here. You see, it will now irritate, I say it will now induce the central portion here. This is called the mid dorsal portion of the ectoderm. And this mid dorsal portion of the ectoderm, as a result of induction coming from the notochord, will differentiate into another population of the cells here. These cells are called the neuroectodermal cells. They are ectoderm, but they are differentiate into the neuroectoderm. And in this central, I say mid dorsal portion of the ectoderm will form here a plate that is called the neural plate. And in this neural plate, you have to see, will develop actually your nervous system. Now if your nervous system actually develops from here, so this is the notochord. You see, this is broken line. because it is actually inducing the overlying ectoderm, this black color. So this area of the ectoderm will differentiate into a different population of cells here coming from ectoderm obviously. So here a plate will develop. So this plate which I am actually marking here green, this plate, this whole, this is called the neural plate. This in the third week you see this, the development of a nervous system is actually from here. And this nervous system that develops from here, so this nervous system develops from the neural plate. You see this neural plate. You can see in this diagram also, this is notochord. You are watching this ectoderm, and this notochord is inducing the central portion, I say mid dorsal portion of the ectoderm, and this neuroectoderm has been formed here. This is neural plate. So you see this is the whole neural plate has been formed, but the neural plate will not remain straight here. This will not remain straight, it will fold. When it folds here, so this is called the neural folds. And due to the neural force, you will see that in between a space will be created. That space is called the neural groove. So you see this one, it will now make it like this. So this is now ectoderm, and you are watching here a neural plate. Notochord is there. You will see ectoderm, and you are watching here a neural plate will undergo folding here. These are called neural folds, and this is now neural groove. But where the neural folds are about to become continuous with the surface ectoderm, this area is called the crest. And here a neuroectodermal cells will differentiate into yet another population of cells. And these population of cells are called neural crest cells. Means the neural crest cells will be around in this area, you can see, where the neural plate is about to become continuous with the surface ectoderm, means in this area. So you can see here also. This is what we call here neural crest cells. Means neuroectoderm or the neural plate has differentiated into the two population of cells. Neural fold, these are the cells which comprise of the neural fold, and the cells which comprise of the neural crest cells. These are the neural crest cells and neural fold cells. But watch you here, this neural folds will fold more. So you will actually be watching here in this. So you see this one. And neural crest cells will get more closer. And once you will see that, you are watching in this also, and you are watching in this, and you see finally the neural tube in fact will. So you will see that neural tube will be formed when it will get detached from the surface ectoderm. And you see detached from the surface ectoderm, a neural tube has been created. You see this is a neural tube, and not just the neural tube, but at the same time these neural crest cells on both sides, they will also get detached and will settle here on two sides of the neural tube. So on two sides of the neural tube will actually be there. You see notochord is already there. So you can imagine here this is now neural tube, and here is a neural tube is actually here lined or formed here by the cells, and in between there is a tube. I say in between there is a lumen because it is a tube. So because it is a tube here, so you see it will have a wall and it will have a lumen. But here these neural crest cells which actually settle here on two sides, they are just like a cord. It's a cluster of cells on two sides here. And if you are actually watching in this cluster of cells on the two sides here, so you see that these two side cells they are present here, but you watch here, they are the two sides, these are the cells. So you can say this is like a ring, but it is not a ring, it is actually tube. And you see these are not two dots here, these are two columns basically. You see these are the two columns on either side of this tube, and this tube is not solid, it will have a lumen in the center. So you see it will have a lumen in the center, and it has a lumen in the center. On two sides it will have a column of cells, and they are cord like cells. You see this like a cord, and they are solid cords on two sides here. These are called the neural crest cells, and in the center we have got, actually in the middle we have got this tube, and this tube has the lumen here. So this lumen which is actually present here, and here these are the cells, and cells they are in future they are forming the neuroepithelial cells, and they are forming actually the cells within the nervous system, cells within the central nervous system. So this is what we call here the neural tube. So this is neural tube. On two sides we have got the neural crest cells, and here is the wall which is forming the tube, and in the center we have got the lumen. So you can see here. So this is now the neural tube. It has a central canal, and this is the wall which is made up of neuroepithelial cells. See again here in this diagram, neural tube. It has the central canal. It has the wall formed of the neuroepithelial cells, and at the same time on the other side you see that it is called the neural crest cells on this side also as well as on this side. So these are called the neural crest cells. And here this is the tube, and tube is actually throughout. You see right from here cephalic to the caudal region is the tube, and neural crest cells are also on the two sides. You see, this is what we call here the neural tube. And here this is the neural tube. Your entire nervous system will develop from these three things here: neural tube and the two neural crest cells columns here. So nervous system basically develops from these structures, and in these structures means if this is the neural tube here, so you can say neural tube and two neural crest cells. So they are standing here right from cephalic region till caudal region in the body, they are actually standing there. And the part of this neural tube and the neural crest cells will be actually allocated to the head region, and the rest of the things actually be allocated to the truncal region. And this portion in future, this one neural tubes, this portion it will expand, will bulge here. This will call actually this will be derived, or this will actually give rise to the brain, and the rest of the portion will remain cylindrical, remain compressed here. It will not expand. You will call it the spinal cord. So brain and the spinal cord will always remain continuous with each other, because this actually these two structures together is called the central nervous system, and this is central nervous system, and from here will emerge their nerves, and these nerves in fact will be called as the peripheral nervous system. We will discuss in future from where these nerves actually will emerge. They are the part, these nerves they will emerge here. We will see that they are partly derived from the central nervous system, and partly they will be contributed by the peripheral nervous system. All they join together to form here a structure that is called the nerves, and these nerves will constitute the peripheral nervous system, and surely they are connected with their central nervous system portions here. And in this area especially you are actually watching, and you are watching here, you see in this area when we are discussing here, so that means your entire nervous system develops from three main things here: neural tube in the middle, on the two sides will be the neural crest cells. So that means if this is neural crest cells, and here, so that means in this area especially you will actually discuss that we have here a centrally placed neural tube here that you have seen already from where it has come, and you have in the centrally placed neural tube we have got the canal inside. This is called the central canal of the tube, and it will have the walls. It has its wall made up of neuroepithelial cells. Neuroepithelial cells will constitute everything: neurons, neuroglial cells, and whatever other cells which are actually required within the central nervous system, all they will come from neuroepithelial cells. And we have got on two sides standing here the neural crest cells. This is neural crest cells column, and this will give rise to in future, if you need any neurons standing outside central nervous system, they will come from neural crest cells. But the neural crest cells will form, in addition to the neurons standing outside the central nervous system, in addition to that, neural crest cells will form a dozen of other structures also other than neurons. But the neuroepithelial cells which are actually standing inside the central nervous system, it will give rise to the neurons as well as neuroglial cells and other things also. 100 billion neurons are present within the central nervous system. Within central nervous system means within brain and spinal cord, and not even a single neuron comes out of the brain and spinal cord in the periphery. So if in the periphery you see any neuron present here, it must be derivation from the neural crest cell, because there are two sources of the neurons in the body. One is the neuroepithelial cells within the central nervous system, another is the neural crest cells which are standing outside central nervous system. There is no third source at all. Now in this area, these are the three things from where your whole nervous system is formed. And in this nervous system, this upper portion that will actually be allocated to your head region, this will form brain, and the rest of the things actually will be forming the spinal cord. And this portion will actually be housed by the cranial cavity, and this portion will be housed by the vertebrae. Vertebrae within the vertebral canal, and here skull bones within the cranial cavity, they will house them. And they both are connected, or they both are continuous with each other at the base of the skull through foramen magnum. Now in this area you are actually watching, and here, so that means if you will discuss here the parts of the brain, so you will see that during the development in the third week, when this whole neural tube has actually been formed, you will see that three brain vesicles you see in the brain area. That means in the rostral, or you see in the cephalic region, this portion will expand, will form three brain vesicles. It will have an expansion. So you look at this, it will have an expansion. So first, second and third brain vesicle, these are the three primary brain vesicles will be formed. So you can actually see here the three brain vesicles, means first brain vesicle, the second one and the third one. The first, the second and the third. And the rest of the portion which I have actually told you, this will remain cylindrical. This will remain compressed. This is called spinal cord. And this is something that you are actually watching. This is called three primary brain vesicles. In the third week, there are three primary brain vesicles. This top one, that is called prosencephalon. In future, it will give forebrain. So if you are actually watching in this, so that means it will have its walls, it will have its cavity. See, it will have its walls, and it will have its cavity. Because it has expanded here, so the cavity has expanded also. And this is its wall. Neuroepithelial cells and the cavity. And in this cavity, this is what we call here prosencephalon, features forebrain. The second one, it will have its cavity, it will have its wall also. This will remain mesencephalon, and this is called the midbrain also. The third brain vesicle, this will actually be forming hindbrain, and this is called rhombencephalon. So we have got here prosencephalon, that will form forebrain in future. This is called mesencephalon, that will form midbrain in future, and this is called rhombencephalon, and that will form here hindbrain in future. These are three brain vesicles which have actually been formed here. And here obviously the central cavity will expand here. You see, the cavities have expanded here, and these cavities have expanded, but not this cavity. This is called the central canal. Has a central canal. Within the central canal, within the spinal cord, it is not expanded. So it will actually retain its name as central canal, and these expanded central canals within the brain vesicles will actually form the ventricles. They are called ventricles. So ventricles, they are actually continuous with the central canal of the spinal cord, and this central canal of spinal cord are ventricles of the brain vesicles. They actually contain cerebrospinal fluid. That's why we call them cerebrospinal fluid, because this is present in the brain as well as in the spinal cord. Here cerebro word is used for the entire brain. But this is actually in the third week. But in the next 2 weeks, you see that the development will be in such a way that this bigger upper vesicle, it will actually develop into not a single, but it will develop into in two vesicles here. In two vesicles in such a way that this one which you are actually watching, this is called the prosencephalon. On two sides will give expansions here. And these expansions will not be just the expansions of the walls, but obviously of the cavities also. So, central cavity of the prosencephalon will in fact be shared to these newly formed vesicles. These two newly formed vesicles in fact will be present here. These newly formed two vesicles on two sides emerging here from the prosencephalon, they in future will form the cerebral hemispheres. So, you can see here cerebral hemispheres, they will expand hugely. And their cavity also, this is their wall, and now you can say their cavity actually will be huge also. So, now you can say, so the central portion from where these two bulgings have appeared, so these two bulgings which are forming in future the cerebral hemispheres, so these two together are called telencephalon, and they will form cerebral hemispheres. So, two cerebral hemispheres, left and right. Right will control the left of the body and left will control the right of the body. You see, this is what we call two cerebral hemispheres. Each of them will have its own share of cavities, and these cavities are called the ventricles. And here these ventricles are first and second ventricle. They are top ones. You see there are called the first and second ventricles, but the first and second ventricles, we don't call them first and second, we call them lateral ventricles. So, first and second ventricle basically are the lateral ventricles, and these two lateral ventricles will actually emerge from the prosencephalon central portion. So, this central portion of the prosencephalon, that will be called as now diencephalon. So, this is called diencephalon, and here is called two brain, you see that two cerebral hemispheres emerging from the diencephalon with their own cavities. So, diencephalon will have also its own cavity, which was originally present already, and this will be now called as the third ventricle, and this is called lateral ventricle, and this is lateral. So, two lateral ventricles will actually be draining their CSF into the third ventricle. So, the third ventricle is the cavity of the diencephalon, and diencephalon, you see, it is the combination of many structures together. It is a single unit which contains thalamus, hypothalamus, subthalamus, epithalamus, all these things together, you call them diencephalon. So, this diencephalon and telencephalon. Telencephalon, you know that is the two cerebral hemispheres. Telencephalon, diencephalon together is called the forebrain, and this is actually derivation coming from the upper vesicle of your neural tube, that is called the prosencephalon. But when you are actually discussing here the third vesicle, in the third vesicle, like your first vesicle, also developed into the two swellings. The upper one more bulging, and the next one which is more cylindrical. Cylindrical, why? Because it has to actually look like a spinal cord. To be in line with the spinal cord, it will be more compressed. And this more compressed lower portion, this will be called as a myelencephalon. And this myelencephalon in future will give medulla oblongata. This is actually the lower part of the rhombencephalon. But the upper expanded part of the rhombencephalon, which is already you know that is having a more expanded cavity also, this actually area is called metencephalon. This is called metencephalon, and metencephalon in future will give rise to pons. So, metencephalon and myelencephalon, these are the two swellings coming from the original already available rhombencephalon. So, rhombencephalon will give rise to obviously hindbrain, and here hindbrains, rhombencephalon give now two regions now. One is the myelencephalon, the caudal one, which is continuous with the spinal cord, and it will give rise to medulla oblongata, and the upper, that is called the metencephalon, which will give rise to pons here. So, metencephalon and myelencephalon together is called rhombencephalon. Just like here diencephalon and telencephalon together are called prosencephalon. Mesencephalon will remain mesencephalon as midbrain. So here pons and medulla oblongata. Because the pons is not just pons, it will give rise to metencephalon will not just give rise to the pons, but it will on the back of it, you see on its posterior aspect will give rise here to a huge structure. The second largest structure in the brain after cerebral hemispheres is the brain's small, we call the small brain, that is called the cerebellum. Cerebellum develops from the back of the pons. So back of the pons, the cerebellum will develop. So your cerebellum is a part of metencephalon. So metencephalon will not give rise to the pons only, but will give rise to cerebellum also. So pons and cerebellum, they both come from metencephalon. So myelencephalon, which is medulla oblongata, and pons and cerebellum, which is coming from metencephalon, together is called rhomencephalon. You call it hindbrain. So here, if you look at this, so this pons is connected here to the forebrain. Pons means it is the caudal part of your hindbrain. It is connected here to the forebrain, especially the diencephalon, by means of this middle vesicle that is actually called as the mesencephalon, which will give rise to the midbrain. Because it will not remain actually expanded, it will compress. When it will compress here, you will see that its cavity will not expand also. It will remain small cavity, as a small canal, you can say. It's not a cavity as such, it remains a canal. You can call it a central canal. But this central canal of your midbrain, above it is connected here to the third ventricle, that means the diencephalon's cavity, and below it is actually connected here to the cavity of the pons, which is the cavity of medulla also, same, we call it the fourth ventricle. So that means the fourth ventricle is connected with the third ventricle through the central canal of the midbrain. And the central canal, because it is connecting the two ventricles, that's why we call them the duct. So midbrain's central cavity or the central canal is no longer called as a canal or cavity, but we call it the duct that connects the third ventricle rostrally with the caudally fourth ventricle. This is called cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius. You call them cerebral aqueduct. Now the area that if you see this whole thing that you are actually seeing in the center here, in the middle, this is central nervous system. There is nothing else. If you are actually looking at this, the caudal region will form only one structure, that is called the spinal cord. And cephalic region will form three things now through three brain vesicles initially and later on 5 brain vesicles. And 3 brain vesicles in the 3rd week and 5 brain vesicles you see in the 5th week. And this year 3 brain vesicles means the brain vesicle, the first which is called the caudal one, this will form the hindbrain. It's called we call it the rhombencephalon. But you know that in the 5th week, rhombencephalon form two bulgings here, two swellings. One that is form myelencephalon, medulla oblongata, another is called the metencephalon, pons and cerebellum. Pons and cerebellum and medulla oblongata together is called the hindbrain. And then we have got mesencephalon, and it will have its simply single structure that is called the midbrain. Rhomencephalon was having its own cavity expanded here, that's called the 4th ventricle. Midbrain was not expanded here, so central canal is there, a duct is there which is connecting caudally the 4th ventricle with a cephalically another ventricle, that's the ventricle of your forebrain. Which portion? Diencephalon. And diencephalon, which is composed of many structures, thalamus, hypothalamus, etc. You see from diencephalon two extensions have appeared here, two bulgings. This is what we call here the telencephalon. Two bulgings on both sides, each will have its own cavity, 2 ventricles, first and second you call them lateral ventricles, and diencephalon's cavity will be 3rd ventricle. So see here in this whole region we have basically in central nervous system that has developed from the neural tube, the first structure you know that it is a spinal cord. So the first structure that we will discuss in future, it is the spinal cord. And the second structure she will go actually straight now at 180 degree here. The second structure surely it is medulla oblongata. The third will be pons. The fourth you know that, you say sir fourth, second is a medulla, third is pons, and a hindbrain has a cerebellum. Ignore cerebellum, bypass it, ignore cerebellum for a while. Go straight here. At 180 degree, 4th structure will be midbrain. And the 4th structure is midbrain. Then you return back again, and then you will actually remember that is cerebellum has to be done also. Fifth structure is cerebellum. The sixth structure, you know that where third ventricle was there, this is diencephalon. And seventh is the cerebral hemispheres. These are the 7 parts of the nervous system. I say 7 parts of the central nervous system, out of which the 6 are the brain and 1 is the spinal cord. Together this is called central nervous system. Central nervous system has no 8th part at all. So that means these are the 7 important regions that we have to actually discuss in future, and these areas we have to actually see. And at the same time, we don't have to actually watch these areas. You see, if you are going at 180 degrees, this is spinal cord. When you are going at the medulla oblongata, pons and midbrain, these I say 3 structures together is called as a single unit we refer, and this is called the brain stem. This is called the brain stem. These 3 structures will be discussed together. I say will be discussed together as a brain stem, not medulla oblongata separate, pons separate, and medulla oblongata and midbrain separate. We will discuss these here. So these are 7 structures, and along with that will be the blood supply, membranes, we call the meninges, CSF circulation, etc. This is called the study of neuroanatomy. We call them neuroanatomy.